Infrastructure Week. It's longer than a week, but it continues. Made up with my good buddy Dario Melendez, now at Channel 12. And now I'm going to make up with Seth Everett, who I wouldn't say that I'd say that if we had a feud, it was a little more one-sided. I found a tweet. So Seth used to be a fan baseball insider. He'd come on Bill's show a lot, and he'd come on the Big Show, and he didn't really come on mine. But I was always chirping on you on Twitter, and you're like, "I'll come on your show," and then I was like, "No." So the real fight that I could find, I searched just on Twitter. Eric Thames in April of 2017 was tested for PEDs after hitting a bunch of home runs, and we were mad about it. And you said that Milwaukee was being small market, being mad about it.
Yeah, don't be mad about that.
And I got mad at you for that.
Everybody, yeah, because my view of Milwaukee is that you're not a small town. I don't judge a town by its market size; it's by its sports fan. And to me,
bitching about a guy get tested for PEDs, like I didn't think that was small market. I thought it was.
No, bitching about it
was bullshit.
No, bitching about it was. I said you're better than that, because the reality of it is at least at that time, if anybody was having any kind of success, it was triggering tests.
Yeah,
as it should have been. So complaining about it was pointless. And if he's innocent, he has nothing to run from. I stand by the argument. Sorry. We can mend the bridge or
I'm rebuilding. I don't look. That was 5 years ago. I barely care about the Brewers.
I stand by the argument. I'm sorry. This is over.
I did do a don't leave because I want to talk to you.
Okay, I won't leave.
But I did do like an impression of what your segments were like with Bill.
Really?
I would say coming up, Seth Everett. He's going to tell you about how him and Kevin Griffey Jr. hate baseball now and how Prince agrees.
Yep. Yeah. Well, back then I was really struggling with baseball.
I felt like you talked about those guys a lot, which is fine if you have
it. Well, no.
You always came on Bill's show and you guys would just shit on baseball for 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. At that point, it was a weird genesis. I covered baseball for 25 years. But after 2015, I took a little break, and then in 2017, I kind of reopened it and started doing it again, and I didn't like what I was seeing. And if you listen to the podcast I was doing and the shows I was going on, I was noticing a complete departure from what I loved about the game. Baseball to me had a flow to it. And it was a comfortability. I never wanted it to be hockey. I wasn't asking it to be hockey, but it had a flow to it. And that year in 2017, Jason Starr came on my podcast and he gave a great line, and it really applies. He said, baseball's always been the thinking man's game, but there needs to be more action to supplement all the thinking.
Yeah.
And it was just too much. Everything was home run and strikeout. And my bigger issue was the last 3 innings. The percentage of teams that were coming back was like less than 13%. So if I use this analogy, if I give somebody 30 minutes, you work a hard job, right? You work, more than 9 to 5.
Well,
get home.
Not me personally.
You have a family,
yes.
Right? I'm steady. So I'm talking about the collective view.
Yeah.
And I was only going to give you, between family and you have kids or whatever you do, you'd only have 30 minutes to watch sports. That's it. That's all I'm giving you. Well, if it was a basketball game, you'd choose the fourth quarter. If it's a hockey game, you're choosing the third period. And if it's a football game, you're choosing the last 5 minutes. But in baseball, you'd choose the first 3 innings.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's ridiculous. And it's not sustainable. And so, the sport to me I was having so much trouble with it. And so the best thing for my sanity was I stopped, and I don't cover it anymore.
So it hasn't gotten better for you, or all these changes? They're not like,
oh no. Well, as far as the changes, I've always said I'll have an open mind. I never said never again. I never, it wasn't a very dramatic thing. This past season, 2022, when the emails came for credentials, I declined them, and I just didn't go. Ironically, the Yankees and the Phillies went on these postseason runs, and iHeart asked me to cover them. So technically, I covered the World Series. I went to the World, and it was really weird. But that was the only baseball game I went to the whole year, and the only game I watched was the one World Series game I went to. And that was it. I saw one game that year.
Yeah, it's hard, especially in Milwaukee. Okay, so we don't want to be a small market, but now we're seeing like the competitive balance is at an all-time ridiculousness. My hot take is that Steve Cohen is the savior for small market baseball. And I'll explain, because you had like 8 teams that were rich, okay? And then everyone else is like struggling to even reach whatever perceived floor there is. And the 8 teams are fine because, they're always winning or whatever. Then Cohen comes in and he's like, $3 million payroll. I'm spending 5. But now they're mad at him. So when a bunch of poors are mad, the rich don't care. But when a bunch of rich are mad at the super rich guy, that's when you might see change. But still, I just think that
but the system is broken because half the teams that are going to be getting the luxury tax money, when they split it out evenly, and smaller markets get that money, they're not turning that into players. They're not putting it back into the payroll, and they're just using it towards their bottom line. And that's especially going to be amplified this year because of the Sinclair Bally Sports bankruptcy, which is going to be announced any day now. Which by the time this podcast gets released, it could have happened. And what'll happen there is there are going to be a handful of teams, like 12 teams, that are not going to get their cable money this year. And if you look at the gross revenues of a team, one of the misnomers in sports is that teams don't make money. They are extremely high valuations, but their operating day year to year is basically they break even. And so the teams that are going to now lose, like Bally's Detroit pays $60 million. San Diego's like $48 million. You take those lump sums away from these teams, and that's going to impact their bottom line. These teams are going to bleed money. Look at the COVID year when all these rich fat cats were talking about how they're broke.
Yeah.
And so it's just going to get worse. And it's things like that are not getting rectified. People are like, oh, they're going to ban the shift. Wonderful. If the game is more entertaining, I'll tune in. But the reality is the competitive balance in that league took a major hit. And when that bankruptcy happens, all sports are going to be impacted. The NBA, the NHL, and baseball are going to be impacted. But nobody's going to be impacted more in the on-field product than the sport with no cap.
Well, and I think too with baseball, it's like it's not just like one linear problem. It's that problem.
Of course.
And then it's the way the game's being played. And it's also like you talk about the last 3 innings. Some guys are just too good. Like everyone's throwing 100.
They're all
and nobody's pitching more than 5 innings. So you have your starter throw. The minute he maybe gets tired, I mean, the Brewers have been longing for a no-hitter for another one for 30 years. And then finally Corbin Burns is out going to get one. And they finish it off with Josh Hader, and that's fine. But that's not fine because that's not a no-hitter to me. That's not the same thing. That's not what we've been waiting for all these 40 years. So it's not
you're
like
not going to get a 300-game winner anymore. Yeah, you're not going to see any of that. This sport has changed. And what I always say about the sport that I've learned is the demographic is massively older. And so just,
where are new fans coming from?
Well, that's my issue. And you talk all about technology and all these things. The reality of it is that, linear television is under siege, yet the NBA brand has never been higher. Baseball can't say that. And I always have my Mike Trout test. I always say that a radio show could come out of a commercial break with a Mike Trout audio clip. And I'd give a free t-shirt to the first caller that can identify who that is. That was the best player in the sport for 8 years.
Oh, I bet you Mike
couldn't
Trout
pick
could
him out
sit
of a
down and
line.
watch a Brewers Cubs game in the middle of Section 105, and a couple people might know him.
No, the one thing I would always notice when I went on that station, though, is there's an old theory that says fans care about a team first and a sport second. And so if the Brewers were good, it was like, who cares how screwed up this system is? As long as we win it, it's fine. And that's what most fans do. You know, my favorite example of that is I went to Congress in the 2000s for the congressional hearings on steroids, the two of them. I was there for both. It was one of my career highlights. Like, it was one of my favorite things to do. I was a sports guy that got to go to Congress.
Yeah.
Like, it was awesome. And I'm walking to the media bus. There was a bus that they had set up for a bunch of reporters to get to a hotel. And I was walking, and a guy came up and recognized me. And he comes up and he says, "So how my Mets going to do this year?" Like, do you not know what we just walked out of? Like, because fans care about a team first and the sport second. It's the same thing with concussions, right? Concussions is a big talking point in football.
Yeah.
But if the Packers are in the divisional race and go into the playoffs, you never hear a thing about it. But if the Packers are suddenly 4-13, that's the only thing you'll talk about.
All right. I think that these are good points. I probably should have talked to you about this long before instead of just dogging you all those years. But I want to talk about your your passion project, your Hall of Justice podcast.
Have you ever heard it?
No,
Okay.
but I'm gonna listen to it because I really got into like Marvel. I got into the MCU. I'm not a big I mean, I had comics growing up, like a little, like hand-me-downs, but I really got into the whole thread of the MCU and the way everything connects, and I like it. So here's my
really fun.
But here's my overall thought where I'm at with the MCU right now. So the Thanos thing was great. The multiverse I'm super into. And I like Phase 4 maybe more than the next guy. But what I struggle with is like, okay, I try to think of the normal person back in 2012 in the MCU, okay? And now aliens are attacking. Okay, well, we got this rich guy who's going to fight for us. We can see that. Then there's this World War II guy that was frozen. Okay. Then there's this other guy that's good with arrows. All right. Then there's this Incredible Hulk guy. Okay, fine. So that all happens. And it's like a lot to wrap your brain around. But that's just the world we live in now. And then all of humanity disappears, which is insane. Yeah. And then they come back. But we've also learned that Earth is not just like, it's not just that. It's, well, what was the movie? The 10 Rings. Now there's this thing with these 10 rings. Yeah. And Miss Marvel's got these bangles. And they had a thing. And then there's this vibranium, and there's Wakanda. But also some of it landed in the ocean. And now there's whatever they're calling that place, the Atlantis place. So it's like, and then the Earth is actually just like a fostering ground for the Celestial. And one time, Star-Lord's dad came and like planted his seed all over it as well. It's like, it's a little too much for one universe. So that's also, since I'm bitching, I don't like how quick we returned. Like, I watched Miss Marvel and She-Hulk and stuff, and there's like no sign that there was no like blip for 5 years. It's just like everything's colorful again. Everything's back to normal. That's why I liked the Captain America one, the Black Falcon one, because it was at least like gritty enough. But I guess COVID happened
and the impact of all those people returning and all the displacement.
It's just a lot. It's a lot to keep up with. And I think they ignore, this is a super picky take, but I think they ignore like the average person and the trauma that they experience having to keep up with all these people.
Well, my conduit to that is what I always love about comics is they like to be real when it's convenient for them.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, they all worked with Tony Stark, right? They all, the Avengers were all with Tony Stark. At one point, they were at odds with him, but eventually they all banded together. And then Tony Stark died. But he probably left a small fortune to Pepper Potts. So is that where Vision got the money to buy land in Westview, New Jersey, yet Falcon can't get a loan?
Yeah.
Again, it's reality. My biggest gripe with
Now
Phase
Ant-Man's
4,
coming out Friday, and he's rich because of some podcast and book he made, I guess.
yeah. Well, my biggest issue with the whole Phase 4 was the very last scene of WandaVision, which I loved. I thought WandaVision was brilliant. And at the end of WandaVision, she's walking through the town and all the people have been restored. And she kidnapped them. And Monica Rambeau comes up to her and she says, Wanda says, these people aren't going to look at me the same ever again. And my response was, good, you kidnapped them.
Yeah.
And what I thought was heroes, which is what Monica Rambeau is being portrayed as, should have tried to apprehend her. Like, she should have been on the run. She should have been on the run, because to pretend that she just went and they waved to her when you knew, and Marvel knew this, we didn't. Marvel knew that she was the big bad in Doctor Strange, but you let her walk. That's where I had a major issue. I've been nitpicky on a lot of Phase 4. For example, Ms. Marvel, I love that she was from Pakistan.
Yeah.
But I thought the main crux of the story was that she was from New Jersey and that she had all kinds of issues with high school. And then for 3 episodes, she goes to Pakistan, and it's just too much.
Yeah, Miss Marvel was like 4 different shows trying to be one. I'll agree.
And then Shang-Chi, my issue was too much Aquafina. Like, I understood that she was, his friend. She wasn't even his girlfriend. She was his friend. And now all of a sudden she's shooting arrows at the dragon.
Yeah, I liked the movie until it was a 40-minute fight scene.
But that's the thing. Like, did focus groups tell you that you needed more of her? And so that's why you shoehorned her into it. My issue with it is it just seems like they are pushing too hard and they're reading their own tweets. And that's
like
what
that's the whole show of She-Hulk.
Well, She-Hulk, She-Hulk could be funny. It doesn't have to be where they make fun of their own properties. I thought they completely diminished Wong, and to a lesser extent Daredevil. Daredevil, doesn't have to be in costume doing the walk of shame. He could have put on sweatpants. I just, it just doesn't have to demean your properties. And I just think that with Marvel, and then there's Spider-Man. We haven't talked about Spider-Man. And, to me, he's the, can you curse on this podcast?
Shit.
Okay, good. Tom Holland's a wonderful actor, but that version of Peter Parker is the dumbest fuck in the MCU. And he is the oops hero. And if you look at the first Spider-Man, he gets locked in a garage, and in the second Spider-Man, he's fooled by Mysterio. Like, you couldn't see how awkward that guy was, and he got fooled hook, line, and sinker. Oops. And then he had a chance to rehabilitate these heroes, and everyone's like, what are you talking about? Put them back in their universes, the villains rather. And he's like, wait a second, I that's not what we can do. We can fix them. Fix them? Why the fuck would you want to fix them? And oh, by the way, your aunt died because of that. Oops.
Oops. But now it's gonna make him gritty.
Tobey Maguire, a lot of people get on the casting of Tobey Maguire, but if you look at the character, if you look at those movies, he was heroic, and he's the best of them. Like, if you say Marvel Comics, not the MCU, Marvel Comics, the best of them are Spider-Man and the X-Men. And the reality is that in this introduction, because there's a thing in comics, and I call it change for change's sake. It's why they took Superman's underwear off. It's just change for change's sake. And so to make Peter different than Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, they made him a dumb shit. And it's stupid. And to me, it was like, that's not the hero. I'll nerd out right now, but if you
I love that.
In the 90s, there was a show called Spider-Man the Animated Series. And on my podcast, the creator of that show, this guy, John Semper, brilliant person, came on the podcast. And we talked about the incarnation of Spider-Man in the 90s. Now, in the 90s, I was in college. So I was in college and I saw this and I was dumbfounded by this show. The show was amazing. And to me, it's the best incarnation in any medium of Peter Parker. And like the Tobey Maguire movies, Peter's in college. Because as a high school kid, he's not a hero yet. And if you're going to introduce the best of them, here's the thing about Tom Holland's character. He has already been to space.
I was just going to bring that up because like I'm watching whatever. And then all of a sudden he just goes to space and it's like no big deal.
He just sneaks on board. And when the snap happened and half the world's population died, turned to feathers. That's what I call it. They turned to feathers. Peter Parker, that version of Peter Parker, is the only character that cried. The only one. And he's supposed to be the best of us. That drives me up a wall. So and it's not against Tom Holland. He's a great actor, but the whole idea about people forgetting and all that stuff, that's so stupid.
I will say that the greatest thing Marvel's ever done is what people call Marvel babies, Spidey and His Amazing Friends, because my 3-year-old is obsessed with that show.
That's awesome.
And it's helped me introduce him to all these people.
Yeah, my kids
he brought Hulk and Miles Morales to school today.
Oh, that's awesome. My kids are older. They're 14 and 11, and they don't watch superheroes, which kills me. We ruined it for them because I bought my little one when she was like 4. I bought her a book for preschoolers called Vader's Little Princess.
Oh,
and it's an animated story about how Darth Vader has trouble parenting Princess Leia. And my daughter, when she was like 6, I tried to show her Star Wars, and she said, "How could Darth Vader be a bad guy? He's such a good dad."
Oh, you showed her the wrong thing first.
I showed her that book, and she was ruined. And they don't watch anything. Now they ask me about it when it's on their TikTok feeds.
Just to relate to what we were talking about before, I took my son to one baseball game last year, and it was Sesame Street Day, and we got an Elmo bobblehead. So now he thinks every time we go to baseball, there's going to be Elmo on the screen every half inning. Awesome. Hey, so MCU, I'm big into this new reimagined DCU.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not I would say I'm more of a Marvel guy than DC, but this looks like it's like must watch. There's everything that they have planned out. I think I'm very intrigued by. Do you feel the same? Like, could it be better, or what do you feel with?
Well, I mean, all it is, I get asked this on social media a bunch. I haven't done a podcast on it yet. It's just words on a page. It's just they're doing stuff. Good. Let's wait and see.
Yeah.
James Gunn has created one DC movie, The Suicide Squad, which I thought was and then he created Peacemaker, which I thought was great. So I like the ideas that he's in charge with this other guy who created the Lego movie, which is great. I like the idea. DC has been rudderless, and now what you're seeing is a bunch of really good DC shows have been canceled, including Titans, Doom Patrol, Pennyworth, the Arrowverse on the CW. All these different things have all been canceled, and that's too bad. Because the Arrowverse is interesting because the Arrowverse, is still from the television model of network TV and 20 episodes a season. and Christmas breaks and things like that. Where now the model is the streaming model. It's 8 episodes, 10 episodes, but they're highly produced, basically little movies. And I hope what DC does now is they go more towards that. That's what I'm saying. I'm hopeful, but let me see something. Let me see some footage. Let me see a movie. Like, let's see what this universe is.
So how many podcasts you got running these days?
Well, I own 3. I have Sports with Friends, which I can tell you the story about. It comes from a tragedy that we had, and then created the Hall of Justice in 2015. In 2016, I got really lucky. Zack Snyder was doing something for the Super Bowl, and he wound up coming on my podcast and ripping Superman fans, and somebody in Variety wrote about it. And so we got like 500,000 downloads on episode 28. It was pretty wild. And then that kind of took the show off. And then some actors have been very kind with sharing the podcast, which has helped the Hall of Justice. That comes out on Thursdays. And then I do a tech show. Over COVID, I was rebuilding my studio here, and I was noticing that my computer kept getting hot. And I just figured, with COVID, all the studios, I work for iHeart, so all the studios were closed. Yeah. And so if this broke, I'd be screwed. And so what I did was I upgraded everything here. And in that process, notice that when you Google things, all you get are ads. So for example, if you Googled best monitors, you're not getting the best monitor. You're getting the company that spent the most on Google to make sure they came up first on their list.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of mistrust. And so there's this tech expert, this guy by the name of Shelley Palmer, who he's runs a consulting firm, and he's a great tech wizard. And he and I came up with this idea of a tech podcast, and we're in our 2nd year doing that. So that comes out on Tuesdays. That's a lot easier though than the other 2, because I booked the other 2, and that one's just, hey, when can you record? It's a lot easier. So,
well,
the hard part is
it's the way that we're going though. I mean, I off the radio in August, and I still do some shifts here and there, but this is, I don't know. I don't see myself going back. I think a full-time 5-day a week, 4-hour show. I think I can. I do a 1-hour show every day, so I say what I want. I don't edit it really, so it's not like I'm if I whatever. I find that I put it out at 5 a.m. People can get me in the morning if that's when they're used to, or they can stop it, or they can fast forward, and like right away people are like, hey, I didn't like that conversation, went on too long. I go, oh, okay, well just fast forward it then. Like I don't care. Well,
radio consumption of radio has changed, and I haven't listened to live radio probably since our feud in 2017. Like it's been a long time since I sat down and listened to the radio. And I grew up on radio. Like one of my favorite examples is I can remember in the late 80s, George Steinbrenner was doing a rare interview with Mike and the Mad Dog. I grew up in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And I remember going out to my mom's car, asking her for the keys. I was like 12, asking her for the keys because her radio was better than the one we had in the house. And it was important listening. Like I had to hear George Steinbrenner on with Mike and the Mad Dog. And a friend of mine who used to work at the Fan, she was on Facebook, and she's very old school. And she posted, hey, everybody, get to your radio. Jerry Seinfeld's calling into the Fan. And I went, why? Like, first of all, it's going to be on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. It's going to be a podcast. It's going to be a TikTok. There'll be a video. There'll be an audio. There'll be this. I can listen to it 17 times when I want to.
Right.
And to me, that's the end of radio. It's not the end of the spoken word. I think the spoken word has never been greater in the evidence that there are more people listening to podcasts that are about things that were never on talk radio. For example, all the crime drama podcasts. That's a huge genre in podcasting. There weren't crime drama radio stations in the 90s. Where were people getting
No,
these
my
things
wife,
from?
she loves Bitch Sesh, where they talk about Real Housewives.
There you go.
So
That's
you watch the
exactly it.
show, get
There
that.
is literally a podcast for everything. And
I
that's
think when
the
I
way
listen to the
go.
radio now, it's I have Alt Nation on Sirius. If I listen to anything, it's usually Howard. And then the last 2 times I like turned on terrestrial radio there was a big storm, so I turned on the news station.
Yep.
And then David Stearns stepped down, so I turned on the other 2 sports stations around here, and
David
neither of them
Stearns
were
stepped
talking
down?
about it.
Wait, he
What?
died?
Stearns?
You mean he died?
David Stearns Brewers.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. You are so out of baseball.
I was like, David Stern died.
Yeah, no. David Stearns Brewers stepped down, and the 2 sports stations in town weren't talking about it.
Yeah.
And that's when, like, if radio can do anything, you rush to it. You got to cover the breaking news. I think the biggest problem with radio right now is that and I'm speaking like totally for how I view Milwaukee, people on Milwaukee radio, they take for granted that they are on the radio. They have a platform that people listen to on accident and out of habit. And I think with the podcast, like, I feel like I have to earn it every day. You know, you got to earn it every day. It's a little, it's not really hard to get.
People have to choose you, and they have to press play.
You don't just jump in and I'm just there. You got to choose me. And I think
Yeah,
if these other people that belittle me because I'm doing this in my basement, if they had to try to do what I was doing, they would fall on their face within a week.
No, I think there's a better chance of someone connecting with you and feeling like they know you from listening to this show. And that's what I hope for with Sports with Friends. What I do is people say, you don't focus on one sport. And I said, no, I don't, because what I hope is that someone will come to the podcast because I had, like last week, we had James Lofton on. And that was great. And, but if you look into the archives, we've had Martin Brodeur on, and Eli Manning's been on, and Ken Griffey Jr. has been on a couple of times. And, like we've had,
give me their numbers, give me their emails, stuff like that.
And it's kind of the kind of thing where now what I hope is that people listen because they feel like they know me.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's where I think you'll have greater success. You'll connect with people. It's the same thing like if you're running ads on your podcast. What I find is make the ads sound just like the show, because you don't have to make them sound, you don't have to be done in 60 seconds.
Right.
You don't have to be done in, you don't have to make it sound like the old live reads. Make it sound intimate. And intimate is the word I use. It's not sexual, but it's have an intimacy with your audience. And I think that's something you can get with a podcast that you simply can't get with anything in the audio medium otherwise.
Well, even in talking to you like this, I'm engaged, whereas if I just had you on the phone or 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have really listened to your answers.
Well, that's how I had my greatest success.
And I'm sure that the guys on our station were ordering boots a lot while you were on the air, but it's, it was worth the wait, Seth. I appreciate you coming on here.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I love that we connected through social media. I kept up on all the things that were going on with you, and I just wish you nothing but success. You may have had a gripe with me. I never had a gripe with you. And
you seem like a nice guy. I'm a dick.
It's good to know.
Yeah,
it's good to know. But no, I'll come on anytime if you want to review Ant-Man. We can do that.
Oh, I will.
I'll be your superhero correspondent.
It's a very important distinction. I am not an asshole. I am a nice guy, but I am a dick. Very important distinction. Seth Everett, thanks, buddy.
You got it. Thanks for having me.